2 words. That's all Deshaun Carter wanted to say. 14 years he waited, through 7 foster homes, 3 group facilities, 2 failed adoptions, and 1 night sleeping behind a laundromat in Baton Rouge when he was 12 years old, because the family that was supposed to want him changed the locks while he was at school. When Deshaun Carter walked onto the Family Feud stage on February 9, 2024, he was 19 years old, 6'1", and wearing a tie his foster mother had tied for him in the parking lot, because nobody had ever taught him how. Steve Harvey asked him where he was from. Deshaun said, "Everywhere and nowhere." The audience laughed. Steve laughed. Deshaun did not laugh. 41 minutes later, when Deshaun said those 2 words into a microphone in front of 200 people and 14 million live stream viewers, Steve Harvey took 3 steps backward, put both hands on top of his head, and said nothing for 19 seconds. The floor director would later say, "Those were the longest 19 seconds in the history of the show." But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Deshaun Carter was born on October 16, 2004, at Woman's Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His mother, Keisha Monet Carter, was 17 years old. She held him for approximately 40 minutes. Hospital intake records show she signed a voluntary relinquishment form at 11:47 that same morning. A social worker from the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services took Deshaun from the maternity ward at 1:15 in the afternoon. Keisha left the hospital through a side exit. She did not take the blanket they'd wrapped him in. She did not take the copy of his birth certificate. She left nothing behind except her name on a form, and a boy who would spend the next 14 years carrying that name like a question he couldn't stop asking. His first foster placement lasted 8 months. The family, the Robinsons in Baker, Louisiana, returned him when they found out Mrs. Robinson was pregnant with twins and couldn't manage a 3rd infant. His second placement lasted 14 months. His third lasted 6 weeks. The file from DCFS would eventually grow to 93 pages. Each placement summary used the same language. Child is compliant. No behavioral issues noted. Transition recommended due to circumstances beyond the family's capacity. Deshaun Carter was not difficult. He was not broken. He was not dangerous. He was simply a boy that the system kept picking up and putting down like a package that nobody had the right address for. The 4th placement, with the Thibodeau family in Gonzales, was the one he later said almost saved him. Mr. and Mrs. Thibodeau had 2 biological children and 3 foster children. They had a backyard with a tire swing. They ate dinner at a table every night. Mrs. Thibodeau made king cake every January and let all the children help roll the dough. For the first time in his life, Deshaun had a bedroom with a door that closed and a nightlight shaped like a football. He lived there for 2 years and 7 months. He called Mrs. Thibodeau Mama T. He started to believe the word home meant something permanent. And then Mr. Thibodeau got transferred to a plant in Shreveport, and the family moved, and the DCFS caseworker told Deshaun that the Thibodeau family had requested to continue his placement in the new jurisdiction, and the request had been denied. The denial letter cited administrative discontinuity between regional offices. Deshaun was 9 years old. He packed everything he owned into a black garbage bag because nobody had ever given him a suitcase. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. The Thibodeau separation broke something in Deshaun that was quiet and structural, like a crack in a foundation wall that doesn't show on the surface. He stopped talking at his next placement. Not selectively, completely. For 5 months, he did not speak a word. The caseworker noted, elective mutism, likely trauma-related, counseling recommended. Counseling was requested through the state system. The first request was returned. Provider not available in placement region. The second was rerouted to a facility 40 miles away with a 6-month waiting list. The third was approved, but the counselor assigned had a caseload of 94 children and could offer one 30-minute session per month. Deshawn attended 2 sessions. In the first, he sat in a chair and said nothing. In the second, the counselor asked him to draw a picture of his family. Deshawn drew a house with no people in it. The counselor wrote in her notes, "Child demonstrates awareness of isolation. Recommend increased session frequency." The recommendation was never implemented. He started speaking again at 10, slowly, the way a rusted faucet starts letting water through. By 12, he was in his 6th placement, the Broussard family in Baton Rouge. The Broussards had 4 foster children and treated it like a business. Meals were scheduled, conversation was minimal. Lights out at 8:30, no exceptions. On March 14, 2017, Deshawn came home from school and found his clothes in a garbage bag on the front porch. The locks had been changed. A note taped to the bag said the family had requested his removal due to space constraints. He was 12 years old. He sat on the porch for 3 hours. When nobody came, he walked to the laundromat on Plank Road and slept behind the dryers. A janitor found him at 5 in the morning and called the police. DCFS picked him up at 7. He was placed in a group facility by noon. At 14, something happened that the system did not plan for and could not have predicted. A woman named Patricia Ann Williams, 46 years old, single, a librarian at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library on Greenwell Springs Road, walked into the DCFS office and asked about becoming a foster parent. She had no children. She had never been married. She had a 2-bedroom house with a reading room that she'd converted from a sun porch. She told the intake coordinator she didn't want an infant. She wanted a teenager. She said, "The ones nobody picks. Those are the ones who need it most." The coordinator gave her a stack of files. Patricia read every one. She chose Deshawn Carter because his files said he liked to read. Deshawn moved in on August 3, 2018. He brought 1 garbage bag of clothes and a library card from a branch he could no longer visit. Patricia showed him his room. There was a bed with a real comforter, a bookshelf with 32 books, and a nightlight shaped like a football. Patricia had called every one of his previous placements and asked what he liked. Mama T had told her about the football nightlight. Deshawn looked at it and didn't speak for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he came into the kitchen and said, "Nobody ever called before." Patricia said, "I know." The studio fell completely silent when Deshawn told that part of the story. But that was later. That was on stage. Before that, before Family Feud, before the 2 words, there was the matter of Keisha. Deshawn had known his birth mother's name since he was 11. A caseworker had accidentally left his file open on a desk during a routine visit, and Deshawn had seen the relinquishment form with Keisha Monet Carter's signature at the bottom. He memorized the name. He didn't write it down. He didn't search for her. He just carried it, the way he carried everything, silently, without complaint, in a place nobody could see. When he was 16, Patricia found him sitting at the computer in the reading room at 2 in the morning. The screen showed a Facebook profile, Keisha Carter, Baton Rouge. The profile picture showed a woman in her late 20s with 2 young children, a boy and a girl, maybe 4 and 6. Deshawn was staring at the screen. Patricia sat down next to him. She didn't say anything. After a long time, Deshawn said, "She kept them." Patricia's hand went to her mouth. She understood instantly what he meant. His birth mother had given him up at 40 minutes old and then had 2 more children and kept them. The math of that, the brutal, simple math, sat in that reading room like a third person. "Do you want to find her?" Patricia asked. "No," Deshawn said. "I just want to say 2 words to her. That's all. Just 2 words." Patricia asked what the words were. Deshawn shook his head. "Not yet." He didn't bring it up again for 3 years. He graduated high school. He enrolled at Southern University. He got a part-time job shelving books at Patricia's library, which made her so happy she cried in the break room and told everyone it was allergies. And when the family, Patricia, Deshawn, Patricia's sister Lorraine, Lorraine's husband Curtis, and Curtis's mother Miss Dolores, was selected to appear on Family Feud, Deshawn called a producer before the taping and made a request that had never been made in the show's history. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. The Williams family played against the Gutierrez family from San Antonio. They played 3 rounds. Steve joked about Deshawn's tie. Deshawn told the story about Patricia tying it in the parking lot, and the audience laughed, and Patricia covered her face. They won. They went to fast money. Deshawn and Patricia played. They scored 193 points. They won the $20,000. Patricia grabbed Deshawn and held on so tight his tie came loose. The confetti fell, the music played, and then the lights changed. Steve Harvey looked at Deshawn. "I understand you have something you need to do." Deshawn nodded. His jaw was tight. His hands were at his sides, fingers opening and closing. From behind the set, a woman walked out. She was 33 years old. She was wearing a green dress. Her hands were trembling so badly she was holding them against her stomach. She stopped 15 feet from Deshawn and didn't come closer. Keisha Monet Carter. The studio fell completely silent. 200 people held their breath. The camera operators went still. Steve Harvey stood 5 feet to the left, his arms crossed over his chest, his bottom lip pulled between his teeth. Patricia was behind Deshawn, one hand pressed flat against her own heart. Deshawn looked at his birth mother. Keisha's eyes were full. Her lips were pressed together so hard they'd gone white. She was shaking. She looked like a woman standing in front of a firing squad, waiting for the shot she'd been expecting for 19 years. Deshawn took 1 step forward, then another. He stopped 3 feet from Keisha Carter and looked directly into her face for the first time since he was 40 minutes old. He opened his mouth. "Thank you." That was it. Those were the 2 words. Not, "Why me?" Not, "How could you?" Not, "I hate you." Not, "You owe me." Thank you. Keisha's knees hit the floor. The sound she made was not a word and not a scream. It was something older than language, something that came from a place so deep inside her body that it didn't have a name. She folded in half on the stage of Family Feud, and 19 years of guilt and silence and shame poured out of her in a single devastating wail that the audio engineers later said was the loudest human sound they'd ever recorded on that stage. Steve Harvey took 3 steps backward. He put both hands on top of his head. He said nothing for 19 seconds. His mouth was open. His eyes were closed. The floor director counted the seconds later and said, "I thought he was going to pass out." Deshawn knelt down. He took Keisha's hands. He said, "You were 17. You were a child. And you made sure I lived. That's all that matters." The studio fell completely silent for the 4th time. The crew was crying. Every single person behind a camera, behind a monitor, behind the lighting rig, crying. Miss Dolores in the back row was holding her rosary. Patricia's sister Lorraine had her face buried in Curtis's shoulder. Steve walked to center stage. He didn't speak right away. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at Deshawn and then at Keisha, who was still on her knees. "Let me tell you something," Steve said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "An old man at a gas station said something to me once that I never forgot. He said, 'God's got a plan bigger than your pain.'" I was broke. I was alone. I was sleeping in my car. And I held on to those words because they were all I had. Steve looked at Deshawn. "You held on to 2 words for 14 years. You didn't hold on to anger. You didn't hold on to revenge. You held on to grace. That's something most people never learn in their entire lives. And you learned it in a system that tried to throw you away." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the producers and said, "I need a phone, right now." A producer ran out. Steve dialed a number and put it on speaker. He called the dean of the School of Social Work at Southern University. "This is Steve Harvey. I'm standing on stage with a young man named Deshawn Carter. He's a student at your university. He spent 14 years in the foster system. 7 homes, 3 facilities, 1 night behind a laundromat because a family changed the locks on him. He just forgave the woman who gave him up. I want to pay for the rest of his education. Every class, every book, every dollar. And I want your school to create a mentorship position, paid, so this young man can work with foster children while he finishes his degree. Can we make that happen?" The dean said yes before Steve finished the sentence. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the Gutierrez family, the family that had lost. He looked at Rosa Gutierrez, the grandmother. "Ma'am, what do you think should happen here?" Rosa Gutierrez walked across the stage, took Deshawn's face in both hands, the way grandmothers do, and said, "Mijo, you are the bravest man I have ever seen, and I have seen many men." Steve gave the Gutierrez family their own $20,000 prize. Both families stood together on stage. Keisha was standing now. Patricia was holding Keisha's hand, the woman who gave him up and the woman who chose him, standing side by side, connected by a boy who had decided that 2 words were enough. Steve looked into the camera. "Everyone watching at home, you know a kid in the system right now. You know a child who is sleeping somewhere tonight, wondering if anyone is coming back for them. I need you to hear me. You don't have to adopt. You don't have to foster. But you can show up. You can call. You can be the person who asks about the football nightlight. That's all it takes. 1 phone call. 1 person who remembers." The clip was uploaded that night. Within 40 hours, it had been viewed 270 million times. Within 2 weeks, it passed 400 million. The hashtag 2 words trended in 63 countries. The Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services reported a 412% increase in foster parent inquiries in the 30 days following the episode. Patricia Ann Williams received over 11,000 letters from foster parents, former foster children, and birth mothers who said Deshawn's 2 words had unlocked something they had been carrying for years. The 2 Words Foundation was established in May 2024. In its first year, it funded the placement of over 300 foster children with permanent families across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. It created a program called the Nightlight Initiative that trained former foster youth as mentors for children currently in the system. By the end of the 2nd year, the initiative had matched 741 mentors with children in group facilities, and the average length of placement before permanent family connection had decreased by 31% in participating parishes. Deshawn and Keisha did not become mother and son. That is not how this story works, and Deshawn never asked for it. They speak on the phone once a month. Keisha's 2 younger children, Jalen, now 8, and Amara, now 10, know who Deshawn is. They call him their brother. Keisha calls him by his name. That is enough. That is more than either of them expected. Steve Harvey said in an interview 9 months after the episode, "I've been doing television for over 20 years. I've made people laugh, I've made people cry, but I have never stood next to a 19-year-old kid who taught me what forgiveness actually looks like." Deshaun Carter didn't say, "I forgive you." He said, "Thank you." And that's bigger. That's so much bigger. Because forgiveness is about letting go of what happened. Gratitude is about finding meaning in it. Deshaun Carter is 21 years old. He is in his junior year at Southern University, studying social work. He lives in a 2-bedroom apartment near campus with a bookshelf that now holds over 100 books. Patricia still ties his tie on Sundays before church. He still shelves books at the library on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Keisha sent him a photograph last Christmas. Deshaun at 40 minutes old, wrapped in a hospital blanket. On the back, she wrote, "This is the day I made the hardest choice and the best one." He keeps it in a copy of Goodnight Moon that Patricia gave him his first week in her house. The spine is already cracking. A boy stands on a stage holding a microphone. Across from him stands a woman he has not seen since he was 40 minutes old. He has carried her name for 14 years. He has carried 7 homes, 3 facilities, 1 night behind a laundromat, and a garbage bag instead of a suitcase. He has carried all of it. And now he opens his mouth and lets 2 words out. Not the 2 words anyone expected, not the 2 words anyone would have blamed him for, but the 2 words that cost him everything to say and gave him everything back. Sometimes the heaviest thing a person carries is not pain. It is the grace they've been saving for the person who caused it. And sometimes 2 words, spoken once, weigh more than 14 years of silence. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. These are the stories that remind us who we're supposed to be.